Hello everybody, it's Calxiyn here. So this is a different sort of video today that was inspired by a Tumblr post, actually.
Oh,
this
God,
Tumblr post basically had sort of headcanons for how burial and death works in Vacuo, and then in Mistral, and then in
Atlas?
Vale and Atlas, right?
Okay.
And so I wanted to do that, but I wanted to talk about not death because I didn't want to copy this person's post without asking first. But I wanted to actually talk about marriage. Because that's something that we've kind of been we've debated a bit on the show. We've debated a bit in our videos before, you know what I mean? Because a lot of people kind of like, they're like, okay, well, wait a second. There's a couple things that are sort of wrong with marriage in a Remnant context, and we'll get to that. But it's also a lot of people debate whether Raven and Taiyang were actually formally married. So here's the thing, okay?
You ever see Kylie and Gira with a ring? Like,
no, I don't think so.
Oh shit. Guys, the robot stopped. Fucking robot stopped.
Just kill him.
That's defense. Anything mechanical, give it a good whack. You see, they're back at it.
Anyway, so here's my idea, right? Remnant is supposed to be a gender equal society. Yeah. And we don't know if it became that way or if it started out that way, which I think is sort of the important distinction. But if it was always like that, the thing is that, like, marriage was built off of bad
marriage,
things,
kind of. Like, the modern understanding of, like,
oh, yeah, modern is different, but what it was built off of is what I'm talking about.
Because here's
like,
the thing, because the thing about marriage is that there's never been, like, one way to describe marriage that would apply to, like, every... That's
true. It's not every culture, but, like, I think a general understanding is that, like, the reason why, like, you got married was because, like, first... like, you're born as a girl, right? And you're, you know, sort of property of your father, or whatever.
Well, I mean, if this is supposed to be, like, an equal society...
And that's what I'm starting to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're property of your father, and then in order to, like, you know, go on with your existence after your father dies, you need to be with another man, or else you will die and have no rights, and so you gotta go. You know what I mean?
In, like, serfdom.
You have to marry a man, and then that man is your
but here's the thing, that's not been marriage throughout all of history.
And yeah, that is what I'm trying to say. So I'm like, okay, well, we have to first see... First of all, if they've always been gender equal. Second of all, what sort of marriage are they using? And then third of all, do they have their own fantasy understanding of marriage that doesn't even apply to any of real world concepts that we have? And so that's sort of kind of the thing.
Modern concept.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have... Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about first, is Atlas. Because Atlas, we actually have a wedding, right? We have a visual of a wedding, right? And so we have Miss Schnee dressed in white, right? And that is, I think, generally associated with a Christian tradition.
No,
right?
the white is a metaphor for virginity. So yeah, it's a hard.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, obviously you have that sort of imagery there, and so that implies a wedding, as we understand it, sort of in our modern day, is like a bride dressed in white getting married, but then you have the fact that Jacques took her name of Schnee. So, you have to sort of wonder where the balance is here, right? Because even though, you know... I think that to an extent they were trying to base it off our modern understanding of marriage, but then our modern understanding of marriage was built off a bad understanding of marriage.
Yeah, but
At the same time, this seems more like a business transaction between two parties rather than selling your daughter.
So
you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the naming convention, it goes either way, because you have Yang Xiaolong, who took her father's last name, and then Ruby Rose, who took her mother's last name.
Yeah, exactly. And,
I mean,
you know, Jacques took the
Schnee
Schnee name because he wanted to be a Schnee, and I get that, but to say that that was acceptable in this society probably means more, because I'm not married. Hunter's not married. But from my personal experience, I've seen guys sort of... I don't want to say get shamed, but they are like, oh, why did you take your wife's name? Couldn't you, like, convince her to take yours? Like, people get a little salty sometimes, right?
It would be abnormal to do it another way.
Yeah, and so I think that in that regard, we kind of have to say, okay, well, obviously they're sort of going both ways. Like, obviously, you know, with the white, that sort of implies... And Remnant is supposed to be colorful. It's supposed to be artistic and everything. So the fact that she would dress in all white, like, for a marriage ceremony is interesting to me. Because here's how I sort of picture things, right? I don't know if Remnant started off as gender equal, but here's just gonna, like, I'm gonna get this out of the way. I think that Atlas is very traditional, in a sense, and I don't think everybody in Atlas conformed with the color changing rule when it first started. Because we just sort of assume that everybody does. But I think that in every society you are gonna have outliers. Right? Even in a gender equal, quote unquote, society, you're still gonna have people that are like,
I don't think it's a rule.
You know what I mean?
Like the same thing how you can like, hypothetically give your kid a name with no vowels in it. Or like just a sentence as a name. Yeah. Like, I could name my kid. Because
even though it's a popular thing to do, maybe not everyone has done it.
Yeah,
you know? And like, even Jocks doesn't seem like he has a color. Like, they've kind of stretched it so he does, but at the same time, I think it's more interesting if he doesn't, because then that shows his parents were very restricted.
Or there's also a reason why you don't give your kid a ridiculously long name.
Okay. And then...
Or just other just random crap. And so maybe the color rule is less like indoctrinated or law, or maybe just sort of a societal standard.
Yeah, and so I think that that's sort of what, when they talk about gender equal, I'm just gonna assume that everybody is and then some people aren't, because you do like have Jean say that he has macho stuff in his head and like say something, I don't want to say sexist, but he says damsel in distress, right, which implies that there are stories of that sort of nature.
But then Miles Luna had then come out saying that was a mistake.
Well, it's still there, Hunter, so what do you want me to say? Anyway, but you can sort of assume that not everybody is exactly, you know, on the same page here, right? And so for Atlas, I think that I imagine things more traditional, so it is like, when you get married, you're supposed to take the husband's name, you're supposed to be all white because you are supposed to be a virgin, and if you're not, well, that's gonna be a problem, you know what I mean? And, like, also, religion has fallen out of favor in Remnant. We know that already, and so it could have been possible that in the past there was some...
I'm relatively certain there wasn't a Remnant Jesus, so I don't think Christianity exists.
I'm sure.
I don't think the Roman Empire exists, and therefore the spread of Christianity.
And so I'm gonna assume that Atlas is very conservative with their wedding traditions. I'm guessing it's like an all-white suit and tie affair. Like, you're very sort of private about that. Like, not private, but you invite your family. You know, it's a personal sort of affair. But at the same time, the rich people like to flaunt it, and so their ceremonies are going to be large and in the newspaper, sort of like a royal wedding. And so that's how I see Atlas. For Mistral, I think that because it is based off of, you know, Japan and some other places like that. Like, Japan is very interesting because it mixes a lot of religions together. Yeah, like, some people have Christian weddings, but also, Shintoism, and then, you know. But I imagine Mistral as, like, weddings are supposed to be a very, like, artsy-fartsy sort of event. So you're supposed to dress in bright colors, like in long, extravagant robes.
I mean, we really don't sort of, know like, this for certain.
No, this is a headcanon video. This is an idea brainstorm, right? So, like, you know, you're in all of these, like, like not rainbow colors, but like super colorful and everything. And you have certain colors meaning sort of thing. So if you're from, like, a rich family, you may wear red or, you know, yellow or whatever the case may be.
What?
Red? I don't know.
What the fuck? Who thought red and... Anyways.
I think, well, red is an important color for like, I think Japanese culture. It's supposed to be like the royal sort of color.
And also, as does the Roman Empire, and Jesus doesn't exist. I don't believe Japan exists either.
No, but it's based off of, and so I'm trying to, like, you know, tie it to what is what they could base it off of, right? But I was actually doing some research for something else, and there's basically a very extravagant 10-layered Japanese kimono that you're supposed to wear for special occasions, and so that's what I'm kind of picturing for the wedding thing. It's like, it's literally like you have 10 robes on, and they're all layered differently, and it's this crazy sort of garment, and so that's what I kind of imagine, and like different stuff is embroidered depending on, you know, this or that or whatever. And so that's kind of how I imagine Mistral. Like, it's a big sort of event, but it's also like colors and fireworks and like you know, like all of that stuff, right? Veil is probably more like a mix. We can assume, like, I guess that if Ty and Raven never got married, that it's not that important in Veil, that people don't care necessarily.
Did they not get married?
We don't know if they did. We don't know if they didn't. We just don't know. Right?
I suppose so. That's not stopping us from essentially doing most of this shit, so...
Yeah. And so, maybe in Vale, like, it's either a mix of different traditions, because obviously you have people around the world that are coming to Vale, or, like, marriage is sort of like, you get a piece of paper, you're good, you're done, you may have a little party, but it's not a big deal, you know? You know?
You know.
You know.
You know.
And so here's where things get interesting. So Vacuo, I kind of imagine, is like a fucking free-for-all. You know what I mean? And so I feel like in Vacuo, people don't necessarily care about marriage, but I feel like an old traditional marriage ceremony would have had something to do with fire and like, okay, so somebody brought up like, you know, like a Viking funeral, like when you build a boat and then set it on fire. That's kind of what I imagine like Vacuo marriages are like, but without the death. So
and the fire, I'm assuming.
No, the fire stays.
So they're lit on fire.
Not that they're lit on, maybe.
Because that's what the bodies are doing in a Viking funeral.
Do you... I don't know if this is a good example or not, but, like, I'm kind of imagining, like, you know, in Game of Thrones when Daenerys, like, has this giant, like, thing of fire and she walks in, like, she has the eggs and then she... Yeah. Walks out or whatever. That's sort of what I'm imagining.
The
so this
funeral
big
pyre?
Yeah, well.
So you've brought two different funerals into it.
You know, I don't want a funeral, but like
spoiler
sort of like,
alert,
okay.
Khal Drogo died. And so
whatever. But what I'm saying is that you sort of build this elaborate structure, you set it on fire, the couple goes in, they get married, and then they come out, and if they survive from inside, that means their marriage was valid.
That's pretty hardcore, and this is for Vacuo? That makes sense for Vacuo, at least.
So that's what I'm saying.
Fucking hard as hell over there.
Exactly, and so either people don't get married, or if they do, they get married in, like, the craziest way possible. You know what I mean? Like, knives are involved, like, it has to do something with, if this merger is not valid, you will die. And so maybe you have to beat up other people, like, you know what I mean? Like, just something like that, you know? And so that isn't based off, like, we don't know what Vacuo is necessarily based off of, but, I sort of just imagine, like, you know, they go hard. Like, they're doing some crazy fucking shit. You know what I'm saying? And so, other things, like maybe a bow and arrow thing, like, what did we talk about? Like, catch and release. So you have somebody that's shooting an arrow. The Swan Princess. The Swan Princess. So you have somebody shooting an arrow, they're supposed to catch it, turn around, and then like shoot an apple on its head.
And a French frog.
Okay, forget about that part.
Is fucking wild, man.
So like the bow and arrow, like bow and arrow stuff, or like Russian roulette or something, you know, just all of these things, and like stuff with swords, you know, like some sort of like crazy fucking wedding ceremony, and then like everyone in Vacuo was also drunk.
Thoroughly do not want to go to your wedding. Like drunk Russian roulette? Are you fucking high?
You know. So that's kind of my ideas for everything. I didn't expect this video to turn out this way, let me be perfectly honest. I wanted to talk about more if marriage would exist in a world like Remnant, but I think we've evolved into something better, into like headcanons for what each marriage ceremony would be like. And I do think that there would still be marriage, because you still need like a legal contract to make sure that, like, you know, you share things and all of that shit, right? And so even though it started out as something questionable, I think that where we've ended up is pretty okay.
With marriage?
Yeah. It's alright. I mean... Like, the real benefit to getting married, I think, is that... Taxes? You get presents, yes. Taxes, but also
you'll never get.
If you're in the hospital, you're considered as family, and then you can, like, if your loved one's dying, you can make decisions for them.
Yeah, but that's also just our strange way of deciding what constitutes family and not.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, you're always going to need something to bind people.
Just as marriage has changed, and there's never been one set way to describe it, similar thing occurred with family.
I feel that.
And you will never, ever, ever.
I love my Vacuo version. I don't care what anyone says. I think that's the bomb-ass thing.
You will never make more in gifts than you did spend on your wedding. That's
it depends.
No.
It depends what kind of wedding you have.
Yeah, unless you're eloped, maybe.
Maybe.
Anyways,
so I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, remember that you guys should join a Discord server, become patrons over on Patreon, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.